This episode of the podcast is brought to you by our friends over at Caldera Lab. Gentlemen, first impressions matter, and if you're not taking care of your skin, people will notice, especially when you get older. Myself and Graeme, we both know about that, don't we, Graeme? We both know about that.
I'm still fresh-faced. I don't know what you're talking about. I'm still a fresh-faced baby assassin over here.
Well, I'm getting more fresh-faced thanks to our friends.
It must be all that Caldera Lab I've been using.
It is, yeah. It is. It's Caldera Lab. That's where it's at. Caldera Labs. That's where they come in. Their products reduce the visibility of wrinkles, fine lines, and signs of aging. Show your skin who's boss and make a great first impression with Caldera Lab. You can use our promo code SevereMMA and get 20% off. These guys at Caldera Lab have figured out skincare for men so you don't have to. They just have the best products for your wellness routine. Have you seen their ads? Check out their website. Everyone I think has seen them now on social media. They're really, really cool. And it's, their products absolutely do show it. Here it is. Caldera Lab's clinical trials have found 94% of men's skin showed an overall younger looking appearance after using their products for only a few weeks. You'll be seeing their products paying off in absolutely no time. And where to start with Caldera Lab is the regimen. It's a twice a day routine to transform your skin, and it includes 3 products: the clean slate, the base layer, and the good. That first one, the clean slate, starts off your day. It's a face wash to leave you refreshed. Then you have the base layer for your moisturization to hydrate your skin throughout the day. And the good is your multifunctional serum at night that helps your skin look tighter and smoother, as well as helps reduce the visibility of wrinkles and fine lines. Every drop of this serum is packed with 3.4 million antioxidant units, protecting your skin. No other brand does that better yet. Caldera Lab is the only brand that cares about this enough to even know. And the Caldera Lab Icon Serum is another great thing as well. That addresses the 3 most common concerns around the eyes, which are fine lines, dark circles, and puffiness. And if you're an MMA fan, you know all about them after staying up really late. Skincare is important, but doesn't have to be difficult. 1 minute in the morning and at night is all it takes to reduce your wrinkles, fine lines, and signs of aging. And just for our audience, we have this exclusive offer, and this is our best offer available anywhere. Use the promo code SevereMMA at calderalab.com and get 20% off. That's CALDERALAB.com. And you can get 20% off with the code SevereMMA. Make an unforgettable first impression that leads to the charming words, "You look younger." So 20% off at calderalab.com using the promo code SevereMMA. Welcome everybody. It's episode 433 of the SevereMMA podcast. My name is Sean Sheehan, and joined today by the Jose Mourinho of Irish MMA Media, because it's episode 433. Was it Jose Mourinho that brought the 433 into English football, Graeme?
He was more kind of 5 at the back and 4 kind of with 2 sitters in a lot of games.
He wasn't. That was more the later Chelsea teams. No, that was Conte and all them. He didn't play 5 at the back. No. Well, he did. He played like 6 at the back. And all,
he played 5 at the back. And
he played more. He was more of a 6 at the back type of man. You remember Marcus Rashford playing left back?
11 at the back.
Yeah, he was. Anyway,
when he came against the team he didn't think he could beat, it was 11 at the back.
And you know what? Didn't he beat him? So he was dead fucking right. Funnily enough, Jose Mourinho has a bit of the Sean Strickland in him, or the other way around, as we move in and talk about the main event. Graeme, geez, it was a mad night. We always kind of start here now. It's becoming a regular thing of a deep overview, or not even a deep, the opposite of deep, a kind of a narrow or shallow overview of the card. And to me, this card, and I suppose for a lot of Irish people as well, was, okay, it started off with the Kiefer fight, which we were all looking forward to seeing. And then there was like 6 hours of, okay. And then there was the main event. And it was one of those cards, I think, and I suppose for people outside of Ireland, it was probably just the main event. But, it was that card for a while, but then the main event the main card was pretty good, pretty entertaining, and obviously lots of finishes and fun fights and madness and all of that. So yeah, it turned out to be a pretty enjoyable event. But like, if the main event had stunk the place out, maybe we wouldn't be looking back on it so favourably, but it didn't, and it was one of the it was one of the most memorable main events ever. What was your reaction, Graeme? Like, was it one of surprise? Was it one of shock? Was it I'll tell you mine in a minute, but what was your reaction to that main event?
Yeah, well, after the kind of 3/4 of the way through the first round, I was like, oh, this fight is not going to go the way. At the very start, I was like, Izzy will probably figure him out. But it seemed like Sean Strickland was figuring Izzy out quicker. And Izzy was kind of stuck on the back foot. So after about 3/4, I think, through the first round, I was like, Jesus, Izzy's in serious trouble here. And Sean Strickland's striking is, it may not look the prettiest in terms of like I kind of talk about flashy kicks and like elbows and, perfectly timed knees and things, but the jab and the basics and everything was just really good. His head movement was really good. His range was really good. His timing was really good. He surprised me. Sean Strickland surprised me in a lot of ways. And, even the fact that after the second round, it had kind of swung back, and you were thinking, oh, maybe Izzy can take over, but Strickland just kept what he was doing best, not afraid of eating Izzy's strikes, and just played his game plan perfectly. And it really was for a guy who maybe for a champion, maybe has limited ability, but he's extremely good at doing what he does best and making it extremely difficult. And it may not look the prettiest, it may be a bit herky-jerky, and the timing may be a bit different than others, but it really works. And, there's no doubt about that now when he's gone out there and done that to such a good striker like Isabel Adesanya.
Yeah, before I get into all that, just my initial reaction to it was, I don't know, it was one of hilarity, to be honest, because, like, they had made this fight as kind of a throwaway fight just to get Izzy on the Sydney card. They had built up this big Drickett's fight. It's going to be, this massive grudge match and all of that. They had thrown away like what could have been the biggest trilogy, maybe not in UFC history, but up there, probably top 4 or 5 or whatever, the biggest trilogy we have at the moment, with maybe Nate Diaz and Conor McGregor away. So it just felt like. It just felt like this was just, kind of, Man City are playing Crystal Palace type of thing, and they're playing Liverpool next week type of, and it did not work out that way at all. It really did not work out that way. And when those plans go to shreds, I suppose, like they did last night, I just think that is, there's nothing you can do but sit back and laugh and think MMA. Because it was funny, right? They put up a graphic at I don't know, it was the start of the main card or start of the event, and they showed like the underdogs versus favourites win-loss record for the year. And it was like something like 250 favourites and then like 123 underdogs. Like, that is a massive percentage of underdogs that win. It's almost like a third of the fights is won by underdogs in like a sport which is becoming more, I suppose, polished and more, set in its ways in terms of the ability that people have and in terms of the technique used. And it's still like unbelievably hard to predict, as or a lot of betting shows would probably adhere to, my own included.
Yeah, but I wonder how many of them are like plus 600 still. They're probably
that's true,
pretty close fights where it's hard to pick a lot of them. But we do see updates, and I remember, or upsets, and I remember a few years ago there was kind of like a running thing among bettors that you should always bet on an underdog if they're plus 600 or more, because over time, it only takes one to come off and you get it. But looking at the matchup before, I was like, oh, this is a really difficult one for Strickland to win, but that just wasn't the case. I didn't think he'd have to be able to land the power that he was able to land, stun Izzy like he did and drop Izzy. And yeah, it was just, I think like we all got the fight wrong and the bookies got the fight wrong. And I think even people who picked Strickland would have been surprised at how well Strickland did on the feet.
Yeah, I was not at all expecting him to win. Like, I thought it could have been a fight where there were a good few close rounds, but I thought Izzy would probably just pick him off because of, that lack of power you mentioned there. And, Strickland has said it himself, and he hasn't even said it in kind of a jokey way. He was just kind of straight out saying, I remember Cub Swanson said the same thing before, and I was like, well, fair play. Like, that's, once you actually, once you say that to yourself, it's probably an advantage because you can do things differently and adjust your game to fight a more winning game, and I think Strickland has definitely done that. But it was a fight a win that I did not see coming at all. Like it's the Holly Holm. People talk about Holly Holm Ronda Rousey. I remember saying before that I think Holly Holm can probably knock her out. Like that wasn't shocking. I know people call that the biggest upset in UFC history.
But there was, like, if Ronda can't get it down, obviously she's, people were laughing about how bad her striking was and how ridiculous her coach's comments were about being like Olympic boxing standard, and there was like memes and gifs going around of her shadow striking at media. It wasn't like this where Adesanya is kind of known as one of the best strikers ever in the middleweight division, like up there, behind Anderson Silva, but close enough, in terms of like success in the middleweight division. And to go out there and kind of get soundly beaten and dropped and all that from Strickland is just, it was a major surprise how that fight went.
It doesn't look like that big a surprise now that we've had it, but if you're looking at it beforehand, I would think the only two that would be up there with it in terms of top range fights would be Matsara against GSP, but I think this is probably third, and I think number one is undoubtedly Pena versus Nunes. Like, I don't think there's ever been one like that before, where it was the undisputed GOAT getting beaten by someone who's kind of an average middle of the road.
Do you think the fact that Matsara was like so undersized and GSP tapped the strikes makes it more kind of shocking?
Yes, it's more shocking, but it's not as big because GSP wasn't the GOAT at that time. He was still at the early stage of his career and all of that. It was still a very good fighter and all that, but like Nunes was the GOAT at the time. Like, I think as well with this, people think of Izzy obviously very highly. We'll talk about how badly analysed Izzy has been because we've been on that train for a long time. I have anyway. But Izzy's now 4-3 in his last 7 fights. Like, this is, Daniel Cormier goes, Sean Strickland caught him on that one night. He's like, he didn't really catch him on that one night though, did he? Like, he has.
Did Yan catch him on that one night as well?
Pereira caught him on that one night too. It's definitely not that. But at the same time, that's taken nothing away from Strickland. But it's just saying that he isn't unbeatable. But I think most people, me, myself and yourself included, didn't think he'd be able to be beaten by the style that Strickland brought, and fair play to him. Now, I think I know why Strickland won the fight, and I think it's actually pretty simple. Like, what Strickland did was not fall into the traps that everyone else does, right? And the only other person to kind of do that is like when Pereira beat him, Pereira's behind, he was losing. Izzy kind of stopped fighting in the 5th round, and Pereira, we've talked about it many times, Pereira ended up knocking him out. It wasn't that he kind of took Izzy's game apart and beat him. Yan, on the other side of it, I think he did something similar to what I'm about to say in terms of he fought Izzy in a striking match, but then was able to add in the takedowns, which got him kind of over the line. Even if he was a little bit behind, it took him over the line. But this was different. This was Sean Strickland actually like reverse engineering Izzy's game almost. And what's the biggest part of Izzy's game? People always talk about it's his feints and fakes, making people move so he can move in another direction and either catch them or move out of the way of their shots, right? That's what he's really, really good at. But Sean Strickland is the type of guy whose game, and I saw some people saying they had said this before, and maybe we should have gotten onto this too, and not even necessarily this exacting, but things similar to this in terms of bits and pieces that would give Izzy problems. But Izzy's movements, his feints, what are they to do? They're to make the other guy react so he can react to that. But the thing about Strickland is his game is just these micro adjustments all the time. So you throw something at him, he'll roll, come back. Throw something else, he'll roll that way, come back. And it's like not big rolls, it's not big movements, it's not big steps to the left, steps to the right, step backwards that lots of fighters have to have. He's kind of in that range all the time at the just kind of cantering in and out of it. He's on. Do you know what he's like? Do you ever see those cups, right, where they have this yoke built into the bottom of them, and you lay them on your desk, and you can slap the shit out of them, but they won't knock over. Do you know those cups that you can't, like, they're so you don't get your computer all wet and stuff. They're those magic cup things. He's like that. He just stays in the one place, and if you hit him, he will move a little bit, but he'll just bounce right back to where he was at the first place. And that is a very difficult thing for someone who feints and tries to get you to move, because he moves and he immediately adjusts. So it's not like a normal fighter would see an Izzy feint, would like move massively backwards, and maybe even not massively, maybe it's only like a foot with their head backwards or a step backwards, and then try to readjust and pop back into where they want to fight. Whereas Strickland's like, move the head back, just immediately does it. And from that point, Izzy was like, well, my feints are not working here, what do I do? Right, I'm going to jab out from the pressure. It wasn't working. He landed a few jabs, and we could see him throughout the fight, but it wasn't as if Izzy's jab was landing over and over and over and over. And meanwhile, Strickland was just pressuring him. And Izzy, apart from the second round, and I think that's why he won the second round, he wasn't cutting off the cage that well at all. It's almost as if he was allowing him to do it so that he could fight from there. But how do you fight from there? You fight from there with your feints and your jabs. The feints weren't working and the jabs weren't landing. What does he do then? He goes to the leg kicks. He did land a few leg kicks, but it didn't really move Strickland. You couldn't say like, oh, we always hear, oh, his leg's reddening up, his leg's gone blue. I heard him saying in one fight last night. Strickland's legs weren't fucked up.
Izzy wasn't planting and landing them hard. He was kind of landing them on the move, and in order to slow down Strickland, a guy who's kind of marching forward and very hard to get out of his game plan, as you said, it's just Izzy just didn't do enough. Izzy was fighting like he was ahead. And he was kind of just, point fighting or just landing and just not, I've kind of criticized, or you've kind of criticized him in the past, and I accept that criticism, but my point was that if he needed to step it up, he can, but then he needed to step it up and he didn't have the answers,
absolutely,
to a pretty basic game plan, really, like at the end of the day from Sean Strickland, like taking nothing away from how well he implemented it and all that, but I expected Izzy to have a lot more answers and a lot more output when he was behind than he did, and he kind of just let the rounds kind of deplete away and lost the title. It was a pretty kind of out with a whimper, nearly. Yeah,
I could not agree more. Like, I said this so many times over the last few years, and I've always believed it, and I feel like a lot of people haven't believed me, but I think they probably will now. Like, Izzy fights within himself so much, and like as you said there, maybe we gave him too much credit for that. Maybe he doesn't. Maybe he's just not as good as people think, and he's not. He's just not as good as people think, and you're probably saying, oh, Sean, he said that after loss. I've said that after wins. I've said it before fights and everything. He's just like, he was the king of a division with no fucking challenges. He's like those fucking countries that have the elections every 7 years and they get like 99.8% of the vote every time. I was like, it was like no one could get him out of it. And then like, It's not as if the division caught up and like really good guys came along and he got beat by Sean Strickland. Like, he's a good fighter, but he's not exactly fucking, Chris Weidman coming to take your head off, or he's not Conor McGregor coming to knock you out, or Khabib Nurmagomedov to come and win the belt. Like, he's not that. Like, I don't think anyone could say that. But like, he's just his own worst enemy, I think. Again, like, as you were saying it there, he could not change that gear. He could not go up. Like in the fifth round, I tweeted, he's fighting like a lad who looks like he's 4 rounds up. Now, I'll go through the fight here in a second, but maybe that big knockdown at the end of the first kind of changed everything. Maybe he wasn't the same fighter after that. It's very easy for us to sit here, but it's not very easy to fight after maybe you got concussed, and maybe he did. Now, he won the second round, so maybe that's not an argument that will stand up much, but yeah, I just think Izzy showed what the limitations he's set on himself almost have come back to bite him on the arse, and they always would. It was always going to happen. You cannot continue to fight the way he did and not get caught, right? And look, he got caught by a knockout, but also get caught by someone who is just going to throw a few extra shots than you in a fight and end up winning. Like, funnily enough, Cormier actually said something really smart I think it was just before the knockdown at the end of the first round, or maybe, I don't know when it was, but he was like, Izzy can't keep just point fighting him here because Sean Strickland's going to land one or two harder shots in the rounds and win the rounds. I'm like, oh, did DC just learn what the judging criteria was? This is absolutely brilliant. But I think that was a big issue.
And then later on in the fourth round, he's like, this could be 3-1 to Izzy. This could, I was like, what?
Yeah, well, like
he was kind of saying it could be 3-1 to Strickland, it could be 2-2, it could be 3-1 to Izzy. It's like, I don't think it could be 3-1 to Izzy.
Yeah, no, just maybe just to run through the fight here quickly in case people didn't watch it. So the first round, it was all that Sean Strickland pressuring. He hit him a couple of times, but I thought he was kind of just about winning with the jabs and the leg kicks, although not too much was landing. And about, I don't know, maybe a minute left in the round, Sean Strickland landed two nice right hands, and maybe it's a little bit more than that. And I think they said, oh, Izzy's playing possum. I actually don't think he was. I actually think he was hit by those shots, to be honest. And then towards the end of the round, there was a massive knockdown for Strickland. He hit Izzy with a 1-2 right down the middle, caught him up against the cage and landed a bevy of shots. Mark Goddard did a fantastic job. He didn't stop the fight. Izzy got up and he recovered and he saw the end of the round. The second round in, Izzy did a great job of fighting further out from the cage, so he wasn't getting stuck up against the cage. He was sticking and moving, and even when he was against the cage, I think he was kind of setting up Strickland a bit, and he did land a couple of right hands. So I'm like, I was thinking at that point, right, this is the game plan that Izzy tried to fight. He's trying to fight. He tried to fight it throughout the first round. It didn't work towards the end of it. It was kind of working in the middle part, and then it worked in the second round. So I'm kind of thinking at that point, okay, Izzy's going to kick on here. But there was just way less output in the third round. Now, this was a very, very, very close round. I thought Strickland won it because he landed 3 harder shots maybe in the last 2 minutes of the round, but Izzy just was not landing enough. He was just, again, it was an easy coast round, just didn't do enough. In the fourth round I think this is where Strickland really found his range to what Izzy was trying to do, and I think he adjusted really well, because if you watch it back, Izzy was hitting shoulders the whole time. He was just missing everything, and just that, and
the handwork of like the hand blocks that Sean Strickland does, I think, are very underrated as well.
Really good.
You know, sometimes when he's fighting kind of a lower level striker, you're not sure, oh, would that work against a really good striker? But like, it looks like it does. You know, it did there. So, you know, I think his defense is a bit underrated. Like, he looks kind of like he's too straight up, you know, he's using his length really well. And as you were saying there, like, he kind of kept Izzy on the back foot, and I think Izzy was too happy to kind of circle up against the cage. He should have been, you know, avoiding that like the plague. And a couple of times he kind of stayed there. And it's like, if you're winning and you're kind of messing around a bit, then fair enough, but you're not winning here. So you kind of need to stop doing that. You need to make something happen. And this is not the position you're going to make something happen from. Yeah.
And that, like, towards the end of the fourth round, that's exactly what happened. So Strickland landed, I counted 4 lovely left hooks, and then he landed a lovely combination, right? And then I was looking at it, I was like, is he throwing jabs here, not landing? But he landed one nice right hand. And it was almost like, oh, okay, that's enough to win the round now. I'm like, you're after taking 4 left hooks here and a combination. It's like, you're miles behind in this round. And then Strickland came back and hit him with a right hand very similar. I'm like, there's no way a judge can give this to Izzy. Like, this is a Strickland round. I'm like, you're 3-1 down here probably. It could be 2-2, but like, what are you doing? Like, you know, and then in the fifth, again, Izzy was just coasting. He was just coasting for the first 3 minutes. And then, you know, he did a bit like, but I think he got anxious when Sean Strickland landed like 3 nice shots and he tried to fight, but Strickland just answered back every time, and then Strickland actually hurt him with a shot towards the end as well, and definitely took the fifth. It was one of those fights. The third round was close, right? But that just means Izzy would have lost by a round less. It was either 4-1 or 3-2, and I don't think there's any talk of any other score. It was just a wild fight. It was and not wild in terms of, you know, the action, wild in terms of what actually happened. And like Eugene Behrman came out afterwards, and actually Izzy sent him out, and I would never criticize anyone for having a loss and not coming out answering questions or anything, but I wonder, will people keep the same vibes they had with Ronda Rousey when she did the same thing. We'll see on that. But he sent out Eugene Behrman, which was a bit odd. But I'm definitely not criticising Israel Adesanya. Let him go in and make adjustments wherever he needs. But Behrman, I don't know if you agree with this or not, Graeme, but Behrman said it's easy enough to adjust and we can go back and we can win this fight. He's like, it's hard. It's always hard to go into a rematch and all of that, but we know the adjustments that can be made. I feel like that's true, right? But
because you could, there's probably like a lot of boxers of the same kind of shape as Sean Strickland that can come in and you can put a camp in with these guys and counter. But I like in a rematch, Sean Strickland's going to be a lot more confident now. He said himself that he had some doubts himself coming into this fight and thing. But as we're saying in previous podcasts recently, 20-30% extra for a champion, that's probably down to a lot of kind of confidence and things like that. Obviously, it's not exact science by any stretch, but there's definitely some kind of leap that we see a lot of the time when somebody becomes a champion. So I don't think. I've kind of been caught a few times picking the former champion when he's been upset in a rematch, and I'd be a bit reluctant to do it this time. Strickland just look, he had all the answers for everything Izzy threw at him, frustrated him, didn't bite it on many of his feints, and yeah, I think it's a tough rematch for Izzy. It's definitely not an easy adjustment. I don't think it's definitely doable, but it's definitely not easy.
Yeah, I think there are ways Izzy can adjust to win that fight. There's two things gnawing at the back of my head here. There's like the devil and the angel. One of them is that Izzy could. And it's not that he coasted in this fight. He did coast, but he was made to lose by Strickland because he was in the middle of a coast fest, right? So he could do that again. It could work out a very similar fashion, or he could come out like he did against Pereira and fight a more aggressive fight and try to blow him away. And I think he could do that. Like I've always believed in Israel Adesanya's ability. Now, as I said, as an all-round fighter, as a great fighter, absolutely, definitely overrated. But as a striker and as the ability, someone that has the ability to, I suppose, unleash themselves, he's absolutely has that ability, I think. But which one are we going to get out of Izzy? It's toss of a coin with him all the time. And, people probably said before, I'm harsh about saying that, but he's 4-3 now. And like one of them wins was the fucking Cannonier fight, which was just atrocious. Like people were walking out in their thousands in the 4th round. So you just never know. Like I think Dana White immediately came out and said, we're going to make the rematch. Jeez, I think that's a big mistake. I really think that's a big mistake. I don't know what, maybe because Adesanya draws pretty well and stuff, but he's also like a guy who is definitely going to reach his ceiling in terms of a draw because of not only losses, right, but bad performances and all this. We've spoken about it many times before, and I think a lot of what has happened is just proven our analysis right. But like Izzy's a really, and just to get back to the rematch part as well, Izzy has been like historically a really badly analysed fighter, almost from the very start. Like, people are talking about his bad takedown defense at the start of his career, and then he completely adjusted, had that beautiful kind of overhook wrist lock control that he used really well, and people didn't really even see it, and they're like, oh, this guy is useless, just take him down. It's like, that's not going to be that easy, right? Unless you get someone really good like Blachowicz, who eventually did it, but a lot of people didn't do it. And then he got to a stage where he was like, oh, this guy is the greatest of all time, better than Anderson Silva. And all this monarchy, it's just like...
Were people saying he's better than Anderson Silva?
Yeah, this week. Yeah, this week really? People were saying he's the middleweight goat and all that. Yeah, absolutely, yeah. So...
Oh, yeah, absolutely not. No.
Yeah, no, just not even close. Like, not even close. But I like the analysis now is going to be very, very interesting. Like, what to do and where to go with Izzy. And I think leaving it and taking a break from a while would be the best thing for everyone. And some people as well were saying about Adesanya, it's been a lot of fights recently, and it has, but not so much in the last few fights. Like, it was 5 months since the Pereira fight. It was 6 months in the Pereira fight before that. So like in the last 11 months he's had 3 fights, which is it's a good bit, but it's not loads. Like, you know, it's not absolutely. And like before that, he had a very busy 2022 and all that. But yeah, I would have if he'd lost at the end of 2022, maybe that would have been a better argument. But the fact that he has had 5 months now before this one, I think it's a little bit different. I think that people are kind of thinking this is closer because of the Drickus fight. Remember, it was like, oh, you need to turn this around quicker. But Adesanya didn't have as quick of a turnaround. But yeah, look, just
do you think any of it was that they thought Sean Strickland, you know, they took him on kind of short notice when they could have waited for DDP? Do you think they kind of underestimated Adesanya and his team underestimated Sean Strickland a bit?
I think we all underestimated Sean Strickland a bit, to be honest. Did they underestimate Sean Strickland or did they overestimate the effectiveness of Izzy's game? I don't know. Like,
probably a little bit of both.
Yeah. Like, the problem is, right, and also, like, it's funny because the problem is the same for both Strickland and Izzy, but on the opposite sides of it, right? So Izzy's game was probably a little bit or a lot, I think, overrated because he was beating guys who weren't that great, right? And Strickland's game was probably a bit underrated because he was beating guys who weren't that good. You know, it's hard to actually, you know, like if you're beating, you could be the best fighter in the world, right? And you're beating a lot of guys in, you know, CFFC or something, right? People are going to say, sure, he's beating lads who've never been in the UFC and all this. But like, yeah, you go in and you're light heavyweight and you fucking take on Yuri Prochka and you knock him out or something. Like, actually, sorry, he actually really was that good, you know? And then, you know, sometimes it's hard to actually tell. And, you know, maybe we got it wrong on Strickland. And I must say as well, like, I got it badly wrong on Strickland. I wrote an article about Strickland not too long ago. And I stand by everything I said in the article about him being a horrible human being and him being a scumbag and all of that. But me saying, like, he's a guy who will
apparently he's actually not champion. Though apparently yeah, he's not, you know, like, he's actually sound and it's just a
but does that matter?
Persona.
Yeah, does that matter?
I think it does matter a little bit. Yeah,
no, I don't think it does.
Like if Colby Covington was actually believing like everything you were saying or Sean Strickland, it would be different than they're just saying it because they think that this is how they, you know, get into title shots.
Is that not worse?
I don't think it's worse.
No. I think it's still bad. If you want to say things and be an absolute cunt, well, I'm going to take you at face value then. Like, I don't think that's a pass. I really don't think that's a pass. Oh, I can say anything I want. I'm just playing a character. No, how about fuck you, right? Like, if you're getting there that way, it just means.
What if you're a pro wrestler? What if you say like,
he's not a pro wrestler.
He's a terrible person.
He's not a pro wrestler. If you're working on fucking Coronation Street, it's a.
He's a disruptor, Sean. He's a disruptor.
Don't bring that word to me.
He's bringing heels into MMA, disrupting the business.
Yeah. It wasn't a great night in terms of that though, because like, you know, Strickland and Nolan's like shithead, whether he is in real life or whatever, I actually don't think it matters. Like if you put that out there and you want, like he is putting that persona out there so we can talk about him via that persona. He wants us to talk about him in that guise. Well, no problem. Let's do that, right? Let's do that. But also tonight with two lads saying the bad F word after their fights, the really bad one. Not a great look for the UFC and all of that. Like I know they like this is MMA and all. Like I wonder are we ever going to become a sport which is like a little bit respectable in any way. Like no, Dana White was like, oh, he apologized and we didn't even ask him to apologize. I'm like, do you know what's weird, right? So that happens on the broadcast. And no one comes on and goes, oh, we'd like to apologise for the language. Like, do you know, if there's a Premier League game on and they interview Jurgen Klopp and he goes, oh, that was absolute bullshit, that decision or whatever. They'll immediately go, oh, we apologise for that language. And I know it's before the watershed and everything like that, but you would think the first thing they would do would be to apologise for that. And what's the first thing that DC does? Giggling like a little schooler. And I was like, okay, an initial reaction, I'd forgive anyone for an initial reaction. I go, God, you know, you don't know. But then like 30 seconds later, he's back at the table and he's still giggling. I'm like, what are you doing? Like, what are you doing? But it's just a terrible look for MMA, like, and for Dana White to like not even come out and say it. And this is funny because we actually we said something like this would happen when Dana White slapped his wife. Because what did Dana White say in the press conference last night? He was like, I'm no one to talk about making mistakes. And like, that just
Manuel's going to have to live with himself for the rest of his life, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's good enough.
Yeah, Jesus. Well, that just shows, like, because from the top down, when Dana White is allowed to stay there and allowed to keep his position after what he did, it just gives free rein to other people, because the guy at the very top can't.
To be fair, I think Dana would have tried to, not make a deal of this, even if it was before any incident with him happened. He just, if he can avoid, if he's forced into a corner where he has to do something, he maybe do it. But if he can avoid it, he'd always just kind of avoid it, unless he has like a grudge against the particular fighter.
Although I think he would have been stronger before a little bit anyway. He'd be like, he'd maybe call him a fucking idiot or something like that. But yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, he maybe would have had some words, but I don't think. I think definitely what you're saying is it kind of puts Dana in a less strong position to be able to say anything. But I think, his actions before all this probably would have been, to kind of sweep it under the rug if he could anyway.
Yeah, and he literally said that himself, so that's not even my opinion. Any final thoughts on the Strickland Adesanya thing? I think it's one of those fights that live in memory for a long time. It's funny, I was thinking during the card, and you're expecting it to be just Adesanya kind of winning, 50-45 or whatever. And I was thinking, MMA years ago, you used to remember like every event and every fight, and not to go down, not to go down this road now.
Back in my day,
and I feel like you can compare it almost to the Premier League, when there was like one game on the weekend, and everyone remembers those amazing Liverpool Newcastle games, the 4-3 games and all like that, and I feel
the Arsenal Man United Ryan Giggs,
the FA Cup semi-final and all, but I feel like there's no games now that we like really remember. I did, like, in the last couple of years, is there any like I don't, we remember, okay, Man United lost 7-0 to Liverpool, remember that, or you remember the Steven Gerrard slip and stuff, but like, when was Steven Gerrard slip? Fucking 10 years ago. I feel like they're just, when there's so many fights, we don't remember them like we used to remember them, or so many games, we don't remember them like we used to remember.
I think it's the jeopardy as well, though. Like, I always come back to this, but like, those Newcastle Liverpool games where, like, Newcastle were in title kind of fights, or Man United, and the kind of was a kind of nearly a title decider, or the FA Cup game in Arsenal and Man United was to get to the final, and there was like a penalty. It was just, there was dramatics and it had jeopardy, and I always say this, but like some of these cards, and even some of the, like, even these pay-per-view cards, sometimes the undercards, there's just no jeopardy, and it's hard to be too invested either way in who wins. Like, obviously some people make bets on things and that gets you invested and stuff. But if you're just watching it as a fan with no bet either way, some of the fights you just don't really care who wins. And I think the UFC have to do a better job of getting people interested in these guys, like giving these guys, the chance to kind of make an impression. And all this formulaic kind of countdown shows and things like that, and in bed, it's just become so kind of boring to people who've watched them for a while that I don't know, it seems like they need to spice it up a bit or change it up a bit. And obviously some fighters don't have like big personalities or whatever, but I'm sure there's some of these guys that have kind of flown under the radar that, given a chance, would have a personality. And obviously they're private contractors, they're their own business, they've got to make it happen for themselves. But in terms of the UFC kind of getting back that, the UFC's on Saturday, and make sure I'm there, like it's very difficult the way it is now, because everything's just so formulaic, and these cards just seem to be kind of thrown together. And I was listening to you on John Anik's podcast, and he didn't even know that Caden Loughran had a new opponent. He thought he'd lost. He thought he'd been a favorite going in, talked a load of trash about his opponent and lost. But he didn't even know that the thing had changed, and the opponent had changed and everything, and it was a much harder opponent and all that. And he works for the UFC, and obviously he wasn't working that show, and he's entitled to some time off or whatever. But it just shows how difficult, even when you're in the bubble, it is to kind of keep up with the ongoings of all. Maybe cutting down the cards to 8 or 9 fights instead of 12 to 14 fights might help. It might give a bit more space for the fighters to kind of make people care. You know, I suppose you could look the other way, and Caelan Loughran's a good example. He kind of made it happen himself. He went out and talked a lot of trash, and he flipped off the crowd and all that stuff, and, you know, made people interested. But some guys, I think, could do with a little bit of a helping hand, and the UFC could do it, kind of freshening up their approach to these kind of not major cards or these pay-per-view cards with kind of dodgy enough undercards. Obviously, it was a little bit different this time for us with Kiefer Crosby making his debut, and an Irish guy we've been following since the amateur days making his pro debut, or making his UFC debut in the first fight of the night. But, you know, for most people, you could probably avoid. Would you be missing out on that much if you just watched the top 3 fights of that pay per view? Like that's a big change from the pay per views of yesteryear.
Yeah, like. Okay, so here was my point when I brought this up. My point is, like, it was that until Strickland changed it. You know, it was. I mentioned Man City versus Crystal Palace. That's what we were expecting. You know, we were expecting a 4-1 win, literally, and even when Man City went 1-0 down in the first few minutes, you're like, well, like, yes, exactly, literally exactly what we were expecting. But what we got, you know, was the Liverpool beating Man City on the last day of the league to win the league by 1 point type of thing, or to win the league by a few more points. You know, that's what we got. We got one of the fights that we will never forget. And that was brilliant. You know, it's absolutely brilliant. Say what you want about both guys. Like, I think both guys are thoroughly unlikable people. Probably both slightly overrated fighters, but it's middleweight, and that's what we have. So,
well, Strickland's probably underrated, really. Well, maybe not now, but going into this, he was definitely underrated.
Yeah, well, that's actually probably true. Yeah, but either way, we got a fucking great fight. It wasn't a great fight, but it's a memorable fight.
I thought it was a great fight. I don't think a great fight just has to be, you know, the technique is amazing. It's back and forth, guys getting dropped. I think amazing fight can be where something like this happens, where, like, you know, a big underdog comes in and puts on a really good performance that you just never saw coming. And I think that for me, that can be a great fight, like a great football match. Doesn't have to be like, you know, all these stylish goals. It can be like a backs against the wall, like holding on to a 1-0 can be a great match. It just kind of, I know what people mean when they say, if somebody was to say it wasn't a great fight, but to me it was. I
100% agree. I really, really enjoyed this. But when, like, if you're putting it up there with like the top 10 or 20 greatest fights of all time, I don't think it's that, but it in itself, I think, was a very, very good fight and a fascinating one. You know, one that you had to pay attention to all the way through. I really, really, really enjoyed it, and you know, congratulations to Sean Strickland on the win.
Another UFC champion called Sean. What's going on?
Indeed, fucking great time for Sean's in MMA. Fucking, we're killing.
Are we claiming him as Irish, or you don't like him that much?
I don't know. I think we leave that for a while now. We leave it. You mentioned Kiefer Crosby. Let's talk about the Kiefer Crosby fight. It was funny. It's weird because, like, we had obviously Caelan last week, Reese last week, and Kiefer this week, and obviously we 3 losses, very unfortunately, and they were all a little bit different. You know, I've Caelan coming up actually this week. I spoke to him for Sure Dog. That'll be coming out this week, and you know, the one with Caelan, it was inexperience more than anything else, and he got a really tough matchup on short notice. With Kiefer, I think the fight very much, with Reese, the fight very much changed very quickly because of that big knockdown and the big takedown, and it kind of took until the third round before he kind of got back to his own game. But for Kiefer, it was a little bit different. Kiefer started well, and he came out and he landed his shots and he looked confident. And all of that, he was working the body. But I think as the fight kind of went, as you said, got more confident, and he was landing some lovely jabs. But Kiefer never, I don't think he stopped fighting when it was on the feed at all. He was landing that right hand over the top. His face started to get reddened, and you could see, as you said, it was kind of taking over. Then the leg was getting reddened too, and it was like, oh, this is tough. You're kind of like, get to the end of the round here, readjust, and maybe try to start off the way. You never know about short notice fights either, who is going to have the better cardio, who's going to keep it for longer. It looked like, you said, cut a lot more weight maybe than Kiefer did as well, so that might have been a thing. So, but the fight kind of got into a clinched in. It was a hip toss, and what happened on the ground, I think Kiefer looked back at it and probably be kicking himself, whether something happened and he was hurt or something, but he just, he didn't do any of the right things. His palms were on the ground when Giuseppe took his back. He wasn't quick enough to kind of maybe adjust from that position, just give up his back and start defending. And when Giuseppe did get it, the choke in, there was no play to like pull down the hands into the fin. Now, you're probably saying it's probably too late at that stage, and maybe it was, but that last 10 seconds of the fight, I think it's something Kiefer looked back on and go, what happened there? Was it kind of caught up in the lights? Was he hurt or something like that? But it just, the last 10 seconds wasn't great. And it's so odd because he started so well, and we know what Kiefer's like. Even if he gets into a fight where, you know, he is getting reddened up or he is cut or whatever, and he gets into a war, he's well able to come through a fight like that.
Yeah.
Exactly. What did you think of it overall, Graeme?
Yeah, like early on, there was some good exchanges, and it looked like Kiefer had the more power. Obviously, he was the shorter guy and had to kind of close the distance to land his shots, but it seemed like he was able to do that. You know, he didn't have it all his own way, and the striking was back and forth, but it was definitely, you know, his best route to victory, and a kind of fight that we've seen him do well in before, the type of fight we've seen him do well in before. You know, going into the kind of grappling realm and the kind of judo realm was just a big mistake there. And as you said, there was like a second or two of hesitation where he just paused with his hands on the ground after the takedown. And like, you know, obviously Kiefer's kind of forte is striking and boxing in particular, but we've seen much better from him on the ground in the past. You know, this was, you know, if you were seeing Kiefer for the first time, you'd say this guy doesn't have a clue on the ground from what you saw there, but that's not the case from what I've seen. So, you know, I didn't see any shot particularly hurt him, but maybe it did. Or, you know, obviously you mentioned the leg kicks there. They were more concerning to me than the punches Kiefer was taking at the early stages of the majority of the round, because he looked to be loading up and looked to have maybe slightly more power or maybe even, you know, a lot more power in his shots. But yeah, once it went into the grappling realm, that was a mistake in my opinion to even attempt that. And obviously, you know, as you said, he'll look back and be extremely disappointed about what happened on the ground and how easily he kind of gave up his back and the choke. And you know, obviously it's a tough one to take. It's your UFC debut and all, but on short notice and things like that, flying over to Australia, all that stuff, it's not ideal. And you know, maybe he got hit with a shot, or maybe he tired out, or maybe the leg kicks they definitely damaged his leg a little bit. Maybe they damaged him more. But I'm kind of struggling to find what happened there. Just a mental lapse with his kind of hands flat on the canvas. I'm not sure what happened there. Maybe, you know, the round's coming to an end. He thinks I need to make an impression here, and then just that mental lapse, and that's all it takes in the UFC against a good guy, even a guy who's not known for submissions. If you make a kind of rudimentary mistake like that, like these guys will take your back and they will choke you. So it's definitely a disappointing one for Kiefer after, you know, a fight that kind of was playing out in a way that we've seen him do well, and we've seen him get finishes in before. So even though he'd probably, the round had slipped away from him on the feet, in my opinion, he was still in one with a good chance of, you know, in the second round and third round of landing a big shot. So yeah, I think, as you said, Kiefer's going to look back and be very frustrated with that fight. Yeah, I wonder, do you think, remember in the Kaelin fight last week where he got on your man's back and then he kind of slipped off when your man had these two hands down? I wonder if Kiefer thinks something like that was going to happen, and your man would kind of try to climb up on his back and they would end up maybe slipping off. I don't know. It's very, like, it's hard to get into anyone's mind there, but like, whatever happened, it just, like, it looked aesthetically really bad. And, you know, I'm sure Kiefer will do an interview afterwards and explain kind of what happened. You know, you just never know. But yeah, it did look great. Here's one thing I would say, like, I don't know if this is true or not, right? But it felt like Giuseppe was way more prepared for that fight in terms of, like, was he kind of always going to be on? He was in. He? That's what I mean. I don't mean the prepared in terms of technically. I mean, like, physically. Like, was he always going to be on the card and they were kind of just looking for an opponent? And then Kiefer, like,
had 2 weeks notice and had to fly to Australia. That's a tough situation to be put in there, and it definitely felt like that. I also think with Kiefer as well, and he said this himself, but like I think it's going to have to be 155 in the UFC. I think the size.
I think
is
I've been saying this for years.
Yeah. So hopefully the next one he gets will be 155. I know there was some people were talking again, and I mentioned it last week, but Reese versus Kiefer. But I think it'd be a good fight, but I'd rather see Kiefer go down to 155 and give it a go there and see what happens. But look, hopefully we have an Irish card coming up and all these lads get second opportunities. And like there was some stuff last night as well, right? And I want to address this because like people are kind of saying like, oh, you're hyping up Irish MMA guy and these guys are all losing and all. It's like, what do you want us to do, right? Do you want us to like not be excited that there's Irish lads in the UFC? Like I didn't. If you listen to my preview, I didn't pick Kiefer. I said it was going to be a tough fight. I said your man was very good. I was on with John Anik, and I didn't even pick him there. I said, like, I think this one will be a very bloody fight. So a friend of mine asked me last night what I think, and I was like, I thought Kiefer had a chance, but I think it's like probably 60-40 for Giuseppe. Like it's... We spoke about it. I did think Reese was a big favourite in that one, and he lost, but it was a close fight. I thought the Kalen fight.
Perform, though. I think that's nothing to do with being Irish. I think anybody who's watched Reese and Cage Warriors and watched that performance knew that he, that wasn't the best of him. And
no,
the Caden Loughran fight, I think we both picked him on his original opponent, but we both didn't pick him on his second opponent. We said it was a huge ask. We literally like laid out how difficult this was. So yeah, I think giving them coverage and hyping them up are different things. Obviously we're going to cover these guys. We're going to give them a chance to speak. Like obviously you posted an old interview there from years ago when one of Kiefer's first amateur fights with Andrew McGahan. I don't know what people want us to do. I think people are just going to complain no matter what. People like their fighter or they don't like certain guy and they're just looking for some kind of reaction. I think.
But I just think it's mad, right? Like. Another hyped Irish guy. Well, like, what about the like thousands of unhyped guys that are like all over the world that should be getting more like what's the problem with telling these people's stories? Like, what's the problem with having Kiefer on the old triangle? What's the problem with interviewing Reese or interviewing Caelan or interviewing Conor or Ian Gary, whoever it might be, and are talking about him? Like, I don't know. I just that. Usually I don't give a shit, but that really bothered me. It's like, what are we supposed to do? What do you want us to do? Come out and say everyone is shit? Like we come out and we talk about every performance afterwards and we analyse and we always do it fairly. Look what we just did there. We just said Kiefer, he'll regret the last bit of the fight. It wasn't great. It looked really bad. Like, what do you want us to say? Like I don't know. I feel like
and the amount of fighters mad at me for saying things that are not favourable.
Oh, absolutely, me too.
Sure, I can't even remember all the fighters that are mad at me over the years.
Richard Kiley nearly killed me, sure.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, it's I don't know. I feel like we're always very fair, especially afterwards. Okay, fair enough. When it's coming up to the fight, we're like, oh, I can't wait. There's an Irish.
Sometimes you've seen a guy fight for 10 years and you've seen another guy fight for 3 minutes on YouTube on a horrible stream or whatever, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
or on a horrible video. It's sometimes you don't know as much about the other guy and obviously you're going to talk about what you do know. And yeah, sometimes unrelated to Irish guys, American versus Brazilian, my pick record isn't exactly 100% by any stretch of the imagination. Just because anybody picking fights is going to get fights wrong. That's how unpredictable the fight game is. If it was easy, we'd all be rich.
That's true. Although I picked Volkov to win by submission 14-1 last night. So it was some pick. But anyway, just I suppose to wrap that up, we'll be continuing to give Irish MMA people coverage, and we'll continue to talk about them and build them up and do as much as we can. Because at the end of the day, and if they do something bad, we'll also say that. How many times have we come on here and talked about the different things Conor's being at, or someone comes in and they don't have a good performance, and we talk about that or whatever it might be. All the time. I would stand by our record of doing that more than anyone. Well, by an absolute country mile more than anyone. So yeah. I think the vast majority of people appreciate it, so we will continue to do it for those people, and the rest of you can go fuck yourselves. Right, Graeme. We'll run through the rest of this card. Obviously, we'll have the balance breakdown with the lads coming out on Tuesday morning, but And anything that stood out to you on the rest of the card, Graeme? I always get a question on the Q&A. Who was your standout person?
The Manel Cape Dos Santos fight. Dos Santos was very impressive. He came in. He was meant to be on Dana White Contender Series, I think, and he ended up getting into this fight. He was only 7-0 going in, and he looked, he took some big shots and he fired back. He looked like a really tough guy. Obviously, we didn't get to see much of him on the ground, but when we did the little bits, he seemed like he had a decent game, and Cape didn't really want anything to do with it. Kept standing up, and it was it was a much closer fight. I obviously didn't know much about Dos Santos going into this, but he impressed me a lot in this one. He obviously he lost and he took a lot of damage, but for me, he looked good coming in there as an inexperienced guy on short notice. He might be, in some very exciting fights to come.
Yeah, I watched 2 or 3 of his fights coming into it for the betting show and stuff, and I was like, ooh, I actually picked him to win. He's just really good, and I think if he could have gotten a few more takedowns and made his jiu-jitsu a bigger part of that fight, I think he could have won it, to be honest, because he was taking his power. Okay, he got hurt a couple of times, but he was given as good as he got for a lot of the fight. If he could have added in a takedown, I think it could have been a whole different ball game in there. But he's definitely one to look forward to in the future. And a good win for Cap as well. I actually think people will underestimate that win for Manel Cap, because Felipe Dos Santos is a way better fighter than 7 fights in would suggest. So big win for him as well, and he will go on now. And he's one of the guys who said the bad F word afterwards. Who was the other one? Shev Marsacal, was that him? Yeah, I think it was. No, it wasn't. It was Radike. So sorry, shout out Shev. You weren't the prick. There you go. We mentioned the Volkov Tuivasa fight. Look, it was almost what you'd expect out of Volkov and Tuivasa, I suppose.
Did Tai Tuivasa just look more disheveled than usual in this?
I think it's the
fight.
hair.
What was going on?
The hair was a bit too long, and I was, as a guy with a bit of timber on me myself, when you get longer hair and you get a bit sweaty and stuff, you just look very
greasy or
smelly or something.
Disheveled.
Yeah. But he nearly got KO'd in round 1, but then he just started kicking the leg, and I was like, oh shit, I was looking at the betting and running here, and I was like, Volkov is in trouble here, because that leg was
Did you
bad.
think? I don't know. I didn't think it was as bad as the commentators were making it out to be. He didn't show it as much. He was still, obviously it was damaged, but it wasn't really affecting his offense, I didn't think.
I did, because I thought he started fighting a lot closer in, and he started throwing those knees up through the middle. He started trying to get the fight to the ground more. I think I thought it was pretty bad. Now, I don't know. Maybe we need to go back and watch it, the two of us.
The way that in the corner they were like, his leg's nearly gone, and the commentators were kind of going mad. I was like, relax a bit there. I think he's definitely taking a few, but it's not like it's not like one leg kick and it's gonna go.
I think the corner called it way before it actually was hurt, to be fair. There was a bit I was like, what are you talking about? But then 3 leg kicks later, I was like, oh shit, actually, well, maybe he is getting it. But anyway, didn't work out. Volkov got on top, and he got my favourite choke, the Ezekiel choke, for my bet of the week at 14-1.
For a guy, he came in years ago and was a Bellator. Yeah, Bellator. And was basically just a striker. He's come a long way. Obviously, Tai Tuivasa is not the best ground technician, but Volkov has really kind of rounded out his game. And, obviously he's been around a long time. What's that? His 47th fight. But, he's a big problem for everybody. Just the size of him and the way he uses his kicks for range. And yeah, he's from the kind of one-dimensional fighter he kind of came to my attention as. He's definitely much more well-rounded. And, he took care of Tai Tuivasa pretty handily there. I thought, might be a decision where he kind of keeps Tai Tuivasa on the outside, but he beat him up on the feet and then submitted him pretty nicely. So that was a pretty impressive performance from Volkov, in my opinion. Yeah, it was very good.
Justin Taffa followed his brother's win a couple of weeks ago and knocked out Austin Lane after getting kind of hurt himself a little.
Poke in the eye again, wasn't that? Yeah, jeez, that fight got remade because of an eye poke, and that was a pretty nasty eye poke again.
Indeed. Tyson Pedro then knocked out Anton Turkalj. I couldn't believe he was the underdog coming in here. Wasn't a big underdog. He was plus 100 at one stage, but I actually bet on him. It was my only bet. Well, I bet after. I won a bit of money after this, but I bet on him to get the knockout, and he did it over 3-1. I just did. This was crazy. Turkalj, I watched a bit of him. He's like, this lad is just wide open to get knocked out, and Pedro is a good fighter, but not a great fighter. But like when he's in there against a guy who's not great, he will knock him out every single fucking time, and that's exactly what he did here. I really like the look of this Carlos Ulberg. I'm getting Jamahal Hill vibes from him at 205. I think he could be a future champion. I think he's that good. He's really, really good.
Do you think he gets a bit bent out of shape or something? Sometimes that might bite him when he steps up. Obviously, yeah, he has time to develop. That's only his 10th fight, but he kind of ends up in kind of square positions on the feet after his own strikes nearly. Maybe it's just an odd way he has, but I don't know. There's something janky there or something that maybe it works for him, but yeah, it would worry me going in against higher level guys.
I think it's kind of, that's something that will be out of his game in a few fights. I think Ian Gary used to do something relatively similar, and he's kind of worked that out of his game. I think that's a thing you kind of get out of. Do you know what? But I do agree with you. The one thing I would say as well is, I wonder will cardio be an issue for him, because, and even though he got the choke here late and he looked good late, but I just think in the middle part of that third round, I'm like, oh Jesus, this guy's struggling a little bit. And it wasn't exactly a fight where he was pushed to the pin of his collar. You know, he was kind of, and Young is a good fighter, and he did push him, but like Ulberg was controlling that fight, and that's the way he fights. Can he do that for 5 rounds? I think is a big thing. Like, you know, when you're not in the juice and all of that, it's very hard to do it. You know, it's very, very hard to fight 5 rounds, and especially with 205 pounds on your back. That I suppose would be a big question, but that's something as well I think you can adjust for, and hopefully he gets a bit more experience and goes on from there. But
it was a strange situation at the end where Young tapped on the canvas and then kind of with 10 seconds to go, and then kind of defended and got to the bell, and then he went back, checked it, and gave the rear naked choke finish. But you know, I understand if you're tapping on the guy, you're trying to get away with a tap so you can get out of it or whatever, but why tap on the canvas and then defend, then start defending the choke more? It's very strange.
It was strange, but fair play to
maybe he was about to go out or something, and he kind of, I don't know,
maybe popped back
or something. Yeah, I don't know.
Came back. Yeah, you never know. But like, I thought this was done perfectly. Like, Herb Dean missed it, but Herb Dean was on the other side. You know, mistakes can happen, or you don't see something. That's no problem with that. Anyone can make a mistake, but the fact that they saw it on the camera, there was actually a photographer cage side, and you could see it in the replay. He like pointed, like he's tapping, and he was probably like one of the only lads, or maybe people at that side of the cage could see it. And obviously in
fairness, it was kind of behind the body, just a small tap. Like,
yeah, it was very hard to see. Yeah, no, it wasn't an obvious one, but on that camera angle, it was obvious. So they went in, they changed the decision and gave it as a rear naked choke submission. Just brilliant. Like, this is how VAR should work. Like, it worked brilliant, and I don't think it's any mistake that Mark Goddard was there and he was the one doing it. Like, I feel like if he was the one doing all of these, he'd actually be brave enough to call them and make those changes. We saw one, I can't even remember, it was from last week, whatever it was. The ball one, yeah, exactly. Like, this is exactly what needs to be done. So fair play to them. This is the system shown to work perfectly, and they got the right result in the end. Right, the rest of the card, Marscal won, beat Jack Jenkins. Oh, this rotten fucking elbow dislocation. Yeah, it's terrible. Jack Jenkins is a good prospect, but Marscal.
The first replay, I was like looking at the wrong arm, and I was like, "There's something happened there." And the second replay, I was like, "Oh my god!"
It was like, "Oh no!"
I was like, "Oh no, I'm looking in the wrong place here."
Thank God, just continue to look in the wrong place. It was awful. But yeah, hopefully Jack comes back quickly from that. McDessie and Malarkey then went exactly as McDessie and Malarkey was always going to go. It was a close decision enough, and Malarkey probably just about better. Hackbrass looked good against Quinones. That was a good fight. Charles Radicki beat Mike Mathena, and not a great fight, and then he called everyone what he called them afterwards. Gabriel Miranda submitted Shane Young, and as we talked about, Kevin Jousset and Kiefer Crosby. Right, we look ahead to next week's cards. There are a few. There is an Octagon card, there is a KSW card, and there is a UFC card. First of all, in the KSW card, the 135-pound title is up on the line. The fourth fight between Jaco Vishlak and Sebastian Privish. So that should be fun. I'll have a preview out for that during the week, and there's some other good fights in that as well. But Ireland's Henry Felipe, Graeme, fighting again. It feels like Henry's fighting every month now at this stage. It's great to see him back in there again, another opportunity and a good card. And I know you've known Henry around the place for a long time. Good to see Henry on this, isn't it?
Yeah, he's always like to stay active when he's active, and then he's disappeared for long periods at a time. So, it's great to see him back, obviously on a big show as well. I don't know much about his opponent, but his opponent's coming off a loss against a undefeated 13-0 good guy, and Felipe's a guy that he's just he'll fight anybody. He's, as we mentioned before, he was scheduled 3 times to fight Dricus du Plessis, and he got cancelled each time. He's basically take on all comers no matter where it is. He's making early fights over in Ireland and Battle Zone and on the regional scene, fighting people like John Michael Shields, even though he at the time you probably would advise to kind of get a winning streak going at the start of your career. He just always has been the guy to take on big challenges, and obviously if you keep winning in KSW, they'll keep matching you, and we'll work towards the title. We've seen in some other promotions where they promise this kind of thing, and they don't give you the fights that they promise, and you're kind of stuck in limbo. But he has a clear route to the top here in KSW if he keeps winning, and he has all the abilities. He can finish people on the ground, he can finish people on the feet. He's fast, he's athletic, his timing is really good. Just sometimes maybe he takes maybe too many chances and ends up in bad positions, but he seems to have ironed that out in recent years. And he's a dangerous fighter for anybody wherever the fight goes. So not knowing too much about his opponent's hard to pick, but it's also hard to pick against Henry Felipe when he's in form.
Yeah, I watched a bit of his opponent for the preview coming out. He's a very good athlete. He moves very smartly, I would say, picks his shots well. People probably know Brian High. He knocked him out with a head kick, so he's a very good fighter, all action. So I think it should be a pretty good fight there.
Phantom MMA seems to like it there. Felipe, he's been on the street since he went there. They're kind of an underrated gym in Ireland. Obviously, it's more of a Polish influence, but they've been around a long time, and this is a big fight for Felipe and a big fight for them. And it's great to see even these kind of smaller gyms in Ireland that maybe don't get talked about as much doing well and getting a chance on big stages like KSW.
100%, and it seems like there's more and more of that all the time now. Like there's lots of different lads from lots of different gyms and lots of different counties and stuff getting opportunities and lots of different promotions, and that's absolutely fantastic. We'll finish off next week's UFC, Graeme. It's not a bad card, I suppose. Tracy Cortez and Jasmine Jasovicius is probably a standout for me on the lower undercard. I'm amazed that's not a little bit higher. I think Tracy Cortez was ranked anyway, if she's not still ranked. Lupi Godinez is on the card as well. Raul Rosas against Terence Mitchell. That's an interesting matchup. And kind of
see Raul Rosas is a minus 550 favourite. That is a bit.
Really? Oh.
After his last performance, I wouldn't be too sure about putting any money on putting him in any accumulators anyway.
Yeah, I don't think so. Kevin Holland and Jack Della Maddalena is a bit of a banger in the co-main event. I think that's a tough matchup for Kevin Holland, to be honest, but we'll see how that goes. And then Alexa Grasso and Valentina Shevchenko in the main event. Obviously, the lads will have the full breakdown of this in the preview show, but I'm very interested in this Grasso Shevchenko fight. I love when we talked about should easily get the rematch and all of that, but I love when people who are long reigning, like champions who have dominated, like a GSP or like an Anderson or even an Usman, maybe. Like Shevchenko was obviously that, Nunes was obviously that. When they lose and then they have to come back, like, was it like Nunes? She had an off night. Maybe it was, Nunes has only fought once or twice since and not looked, I suppose, amazing. But what was it, an off night, or what was it? Like, what happened? Why did you lose? And we get to see it immediately here for Shevchenko in the rematch against Grasso, and I'm just fascinated to see what happens. Like I think Shevchenko will be able to adjust, and I think she will be able to win, but who knows? We you mentioned it earlier on, Graeme, about the champions, I suppose, extra 30% they get when they become the champion, and if that is the case here, it's probably going to be an even better fight than the last one.
And it breaks the momentum of the champion as well, that kind of unbeatable feeling that kind of grows and grows.
Do you think it'll be Grasso's fight so to take?
Yeah, like I'm leaning Grasso, but it's I wouldn't be surprised at all if Shevchenko could make minor adjustments and win rounds. But I wasn't too impressed with her against Talia Santos either. If it was just the Alexo Grasso kind of hiccup, I'd be kind of more confident in Shevchenko. But yeah, I'm just leaning towards Alexo Grasso here. Sometimes style matchups are just hard to overcome, and as you said, the confidence is probably with Grasso here as well. She looked like very nervous coming into the first fight. Even though she won, she looked very nervous and was able to overcome that. I don't think she'll be as nervous this time. And, sometimes the nerves kind of, once you're in there and you're fighting, they go away. But I think the kind of pressure is more on Shevchenko now. It's a different situation that she's not really used to in recent years. So, yeah, this is a real toss up. I'm leaning Grasso, but by the time the fight comes around, I could be swinging the other way.
Yeah, I think I'm just about leaning Shevchenko. I need to go back and watch the fight, and we will do that, and maybe we can hop on and talk a little bit more about it or anything later on in the week. But I seem to remember like Shevchenko was winning the fight, and Grasso kind of turned it around and got the late finish and things. But yeah, I'm interested to see. Right, so Shevchenko, what she's really good at is, I suppose, controlling the rhythm of fights. And she wasn't able to do that towards obviously the second half of that fight, nor obviously towards the end. But if she can control that rhythm throughout the fight, and if she can get kind of Grasso out of her jabbing and her own control game, I think it is there for the winner for Shevchenko. But like the opposite of that is also true. If Grasso can get her jabbing game going and can take Shevchenko out of it, then it's there for her as well. But I still believe. I think
Grasso had won one of the first couple of rounds. Had you not?
Yeah, she did. Yeah. Well, it wasn't like Shevchenko was blowing her away or anything, but I think she was ahead. I'll have to go back and watch it, as I said. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to this. I'm looking forward to seeing the adjustments that are made and seeing who wins. So yeah. We will leave it there. Thank you to everybody for tuning in. If you haven't already, please sign up over on Patreon, patreon.com/SevereMMA podcast. It is only $5 a month. And yeah, you get stuff there. Also, if you would like some beautiful face stuff, go to calderalab.com, get 20% off with the promo code SevereMMA. And if you don't want to spend any money, you can just hit the subscribe button here. You can go to SevereMMA.com, check out loads of stuff. Go over and subscribe to the old triangle. Click subscribe on our YouTube. Shout out to everyone. Oh yeah, a couple of things. We passed 30,000 subscribers on YouTube, which is fucking massive for us. Thank you to everyone who has subscribed. Also,
we did it without any clickbaity, bullshitty,
no bullshit,
fake newsy. Obviously, 30,000 isn't 100,000. There isn't a million like you see on some others, but it's the real stuff, the no bullshit stuff. So it's good to hit that milestone finally. It'd be nice if anybody listening who hasn't subscribed, just go to SevereMMA.com/YouTube and check out our videos and subscribe if you like it, and hit the notification bell if you want to get updates on when we put up all our shows and interviews and mini documentaries.
Indeed. And August, Graeme, I don't know if you know this, but August was the highest number of listeners to the SevereMMA podcast in any month ever. So fair play to everyone for tuning in. You're a great bunch, and we couldn't do it without you. So fair play to every single one of you out there. Right, we leave it there. Follow me at SeanSheehanBa on Twitter. Follow Graeme at SevereMMA pod as well if you have questions. The Q&A will be out on Wednesday. If you have any questions for that, head on over to Patreon, sign up there, and you can send in a question. I will answer it. And Graeme, take us out on your quote of the week.
This whole damn world could fall apart. You'll be okay. Follow your heart. You're in harm's way. I'm right behind. Now say your mind.
I'm colorblind. That sounded like a Ricky Gervais.
You've got the music in you.
Have I? Okay. Right, we'll see you all next week, lads. Good luck.